The Orcans sent Atlas to an asteroid, alone. Not a squad, not a battalion of DAX, not a fleet. One Warframe, hurtling towards a rock the size of a city, and with Earth slowly creeping on the horizon behind him. On that rock, a cult was singing a song of doom. Welcome back to the Alphabetical Archive. I'm Shinori, and today we're covering Atlas. The Mountain, the frame who punches rock into rubble, and honestly, one of the most underappreciated lore stories in the entire game, because it's not just a combat mission, it's the story of how one Warframe listened to an asteroid's fault lines and turned a doomsday event into rain. The Codex frames Atlas as a brawler with his fists as hard as stone, commanding terrestrial elements. The Lotus puts it simply, moving mountains is no easy task to know. Atlas endures. And that's true, but it undersells him by a lot. Because Atlas's connection to stone isn't just a power set. It's not just a big guy hit hard. His relationship with the earth is something deeper, almost intuitive. He doesn't just move rock around, he feels it. He senses the way it trembles, where the faults run, what frequencies make it sing. He's pretty much an earthbender. And the Laverian tells us what happens when the Orcan sends the one being who can hear the ground speak to the one place where the ground had something to say. So, let's set the stage. Temple Telamon wasn't a place, it was a cult, a fanatical group that had spread across the Origin system, broadcasting prophecies through songs about a great stone destroyer, a god who could shatter the world and lead them all to rebirth. And here's what made them dangerous. They weren't just singing, they were organizing. The organ initially laughed them off, mocked their off-key singing and hypnotic dancing, but the message found an audience among the oppressed lower castes. The spell only grew stronger. Then, an asteroid was detected on a collision course with Earth. The Telemons celebrated. To them, this was prophecy fulfilled, divine intervention. Their stone destroyer had arrived. But it wasn't divine. Investigation revealed that the Telemons had hijacked the asteroid themselves, fitting it with colossal steering thrusters and manning them with armed cult members. They had literally aimed a rock at Earth and were riding it down to make sure it stayed on course. And for the first time in living memory, the organ showed vulnerability. But this is where it gets interesting. The organ had every weapon in the box. They could have sent a fleet. They could have blown the asteroid apart from orbit. Maybe. They had options. But instead, they sent Atlas, one frame on a solo mission. And why? This wasn't a problem you could solve with firepower. Blowing up an asteroid that size near Earth could have been just as catastrophic as letting it hit. The plan was surgical. Atlas would crash onto the rock, reach the thrusters, reorient them, and push the asteroid off course. You needed someone who understood stone, who could navigate a massive geological object and physically redirect it. You needed the mountain. Juices shows us the Shikoro helm in the exhibit. This beautifully armored headpiece with angled ballistic plating and reinforced neck protection. He makes a point of saying Atlas would soon need both. That tells you what was waiting for him up there. Atlas hit the asteroid and the Telemons were ready for him. Now, the Laverian doesn't give us a blow-by-blow, but we do get pieces. Drusus shows us the Tekko, Atlas's signature fist weapons, and described them with this loving detail. Ornate moldings, complex blades, and a beauty and craftsmanship that completely contrasts Atlas's otherwise workmanlike build. And then Juices drops this line: "The beauty and craftsmanship conceal the true purpose of the Tekko, as indentations found in cultists' skulls can attest." Yeah, that's what those pretty gauntlets were for. And then there's the tableau. Later in the debris field, historians found petrified cultists' bodies turned to stone mid-struggle. Drusus describes them as frozen in a tableau of struggle and death. And then he adds this haunting question: or was it perhaps a dance? Now think about that for a second. The cultists who worshipped a stone destroyer were themselves turned to stone, and the way they were frozen, you couldn't tell if they were fighting or performing the ritual. The line between violence and worship had completely blurred. Atlas fought his way towards the thrusters. That was the mission after all. Reach them, reorient them, save Earth. Simple enough in theory. But the Telemon saw him coming, and they made a choice. They detonated the thruster footings. Just blew them off the asteroid entirely and sent them spiraling into space. Gone. The cult's logic was brutal. Mass and inertia would carry the rock to its fate regardless. They didn't need the thrusters anymore. They just needed Atlas to have no way to push the asteroid off course. So now Atlas is standing on a city-sized rock hurtling towards Earth with no thrusters, surrounded by cultists and seemingly out of options. The stratum cyanidana in the exhibit, Drusus tells us, is reserved and austere until you turn it over and reveal the glowing hue of the amethyst crystal within. He asks us to imagine those spiraling ribbons as Atlas tore through towards the thrusters that were no longer there. Earth was getting bigger on the horizon. The cult's hymn was getting louder. The stone shall shatter all. And then Atlas knelt down. This is the moment. This is where the entire story pivots. Drusus describes Atlas kneeling, head and hands pressed to the ground in apparent defeat, as the Telemon hymn grew even louder around him. The cultists must have thought they won. Their god of stone was coming, and the Orichan's champion had fallen to its knees. But Atlas wasn't surrendering. He was listening. Feeling the way the stone trembled to the hymn's pitch, sensing the fault lines within the rock, the hidden fractures, the places where the asteroid wanted to break apart. The cult had been singing about stone for years, and yet they never realized their own hymn was resonating through the very rock they rode. And Atlas heard every note. And what happened next is honestly one of the most metal moments in all of Warframe lore. Atlas summoned his rumblers, those stone golems, inert and rigid formations compelled to life, Drusus calls them. And picture the confusion of those Telemon. The very stone they worshipped came alive and set upon them. Drusus says it perfectly. How could they retaliate against such a thing? Like sparring with a landslide. But the rumblers weren't just fighting, they were drumming, beating along the asteroid's fault lines in a godlike rhythm, each impact widening the fractures Atlas had sensed. A percussive demolition guided by Atlas's understanding of the rock's deepest weaknesses. And then Atlas struck the final, resonant chord. The asteroid exploded, all at once, the entire thing. This city-sized rock aimed at Earth, shattered into dust. And that dust fell as shimmering rain sparkling across the atmosphere. Just poof, gone. The Telemon's song fell silent, and children as far as Neptune turned away and swirled their spoons in greasy broth. And that's all for the lore. Now let's talk gameplay, because Alice's kit is the story translated into abilities. Landslide. He charges forward and punches with the weight of a geological event, fists coated in stone, rubble trailing behind every hit. This is the frame who left indentation in cultist skulls with ornate gauntlets. Tectonics. He pulls a wall of rock out of the ground, then shatters it outward. Defense that becomes offense in an instant. Architecture as a weapon. Petrify. He turns living enemies into stone. Their tissue becomes mineral. The tableau of the Temple Telamon. Frozen bodies that could be a struggle or dance. That's this ability spread large across a battlefield. Rumblers. He summons stone golems from the earth, the same constructs that drummed along an asteroid's fault lines in a godlike rhythm until the whole thing came apart. Every ability tells the same story. Alice takes what's inert and makes it purposeful. He listens to what Earth already contains and gives it direction. He doesn't dominate stone, he collaborates with it. He's an earthbender, basically. So, what does Alice's story actually tell us? For one, it shows us that the Organ, for all their cruelty and ego, were occasionally capable of elegance. They didn't throw an army at this problem. They sent one frame who understood the material. One frame, one mission, perfectly matched. But more than that, it tells us something about what happens when belief meets reality. The Temple Telamon cult worshipped stone. They sang to it. They built their entire cosmology around a stone destroyer that would remake the world. And in the end, a stone destroyer did come. It just wasn't their god. It was the earthbender Alice. And the cruelest irony, their own hymn, the song they'd spread across the entire system, was a frequency that betrayed the asteroid fault lines to the one being who could hear them. Their worship became their undoing, and the stone they revered became the instrument of their end. And that's Atlas, episode 2 of the Alphabetical Archive. Next, we move to the letter B, and we start asking some uncomfortable questions about the frames whose stories the Organ chose not to preserve. That's gonna be a fun one. If this landed for you, the Laverian exhibit is sitting right there in your orbiter. Everything Juices has, he laid out for you to see. Go take a look, listen to how he describes the tech code, stand in front of those rumblers. It's worth it. I'll see you at the next stone.